The train rattled through the endless fields, its rhythmic hum echoing in my chest like a quiet warning. I hadn't been home in 6 years, and yet the scent of the approaching town dust, rain, and a faint trace of memory still felt the same. My name is Siren, 25 now though. Most days I still feel like the quiet, invisible girl who used to sit in the corner during family gatherings, unnoticed, unheard. Coming back wasn't easy. But when my mother called to say that my cousin Daniel was getting engaged, something in me felt obligated to return, perhaps curiosity or guilt, or the strange ache that home always brings. Daniel had always been everything I wasn't: outspoken, adored, ambitious. The kind of person whose laughter could fill an entire room. I had once looked up to him like an older brother, though our worlds were too different for closeness. While he built a career, a reputation, a life, I drifted from city to city, painting faces I could never forget and writing letters I never sent. When I arrived at the old house, it was glowing with life. Music spilled out from the living room, the air thick with the scent of baked bread and new beginnings. Family members hugged me with polite warmth, their smiles rehearsed. I was home but only in geography, not in heart. And then I saw her. She stood at the far end of the room, near the window draped in golden curtains. Lucy, Daniel's fiancée. I had heard about her briefly on the phone, a beautiful woman, elegant, soft-spoken, the daughter of one of Daniel's business partners. But no one's words could have prepared me for what it felt like to see her in person. She turned as Daniel called my name. Our eyes met for the first time. There was no dramatic music, no thunder of fate. Just a stillness, a heartbeat's pause where the world seemed to shift quietly off balance. Lucy smiled. It was the kind of smile that reached her eyes, gentle yet searching. She moved closer, extending her hand. "You must be Siren," she said, her voice smooth, almost melodic. "Daniel has told me so much about you." Her hand was warm against mine. A polite handshake, nothing more, but it lingered, just a fraction longer than it should have. Enough for my pulse to betray me. I smiled back, a little too stiffly. "I hope it was all good things." She laughed, a soft ripple of sound that seemed to dissolve the noise around us. "Mostly good," she teased. "He said you're impossible to reach, but worth waiting for." Daniel joined us, throwing an arm around my shoulder. "This is Lucy, the soon-to-be Mrs. Daniel Hawley," he said proudly. "And this troublemaker," he nudged me, "is my little cousin who disappeared to become some mysterious artist." Lucy's eyes flickered with interest. "An artist? That explains the calmness in your eyes," she said. There was no mockery in her tone, just quiet curiosity, as if she was trying to understand me before I had even said a word. Dinner was lively, filled with laughter and stories I only half listened to. The table overflowed with roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and nostalgia. I sat across from Lucy, trying not to meet her gaze, though every few minutes I could feel it on me, a soft, uncertain glance that seemed to ask something wordless. At one point, Daniel raised a toast to love, to beginnings, to family. The room cheered. Lucy smiled at him, but her fingers traced the rim of her glass instead of holding it. I watched the small movement, wondering if I was imagining the distance in her eyes. Later, when the plates were cleared and the noise dulled into background chatter, Lucy approached me again. We stood near the back garden door, the night air slipping through the cracks, cool and heavy with the smell of jasmine. "You don't like crowds much, do you?" she asked softly. I shook my head, smiling faintly. "Not really. They always make me feel like I'm standing outside a window, watching everyone else live." Lucy tilted her head. "That's a poetic way to put it." "I know what you mean, though. Sometimes it's easier to be the observer." Her words found their way under my skin, like something personal she hadn't meant to reveal. I didn't know how to respond, so I just looked at her. For a long second, neither of us spoke. The lights from inside spilled across her face, outlining her features in soft gold, the delicate curve of her cheek, the way her eyes held both confidence and sadness. "I hope you'll stay for the engagement week," she said finally. It would mean a lot to Daniel. And maybe to me too. Before I could answer, she smiled again, smaller this time, almost shy, and walked away to join the others. I stood there long after she was gone, staring at the faint outline of her shadow through the curtain. Something inside me felt unsettled, though I couldn't name it. It wasn't love, at least not yet. It was curiosity laced with guilt, a dangerous warmth rising in a place I thought had gone cold years ago. I told myself it was nothing. Just admiration, a passing spark, a meaningless reaction to a beautiful stranger. But deep down, I knew better. There was something about her that didn't feel like chance. When the guests finally left, the house grew quiet except for the faint ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hallway. I lay awake in my childhood room, staring at the cracked ceiling, the echo of laughter still circling my thoughts. I could hear her voice downstairs, faint and musical, saying goodnight to Daniel's mother, and then silence. But in that silence, my heart refused to rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her standing by the window, smiling at me like she knew a secret we both weren't supposed to share. I turned over, pressing my face into the pillow, trying to bury the thought. I told myself it would fade by morning. It had to. Yet as the night deepened and the house slipped into sleep, her laughter soft and distant echoed through the corridor. It brushed against my heart like a whisper I couldn't unhear. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing her laughter in the hallway. The week that followed unfolded like a dream that didn't know whether it wanted to be beautiful or cruel. The house was alive with wedding preparations, flowers, ribbons, the clatter of dishes, and voices rising and falling in constant motion. Every room smelled of fresh paint and celebration. But in the middle of that chaos, my heart carried a silence I couldn't explain. Lucy and Daniel's engagement week had turned the house into a festival, and I had become the quiet observer again, the one who smiled politely, helped with decorations, and slipped away whenever laughter grew too loud. I told myself I was there for family, but every time I caught sight of Lucy moving through the crowd, her soft dress brushing the floor, her hair catching the light like glass, I knew I was lying to myself. She was everywhere. And somehow, she always found her way to me. The first few times, it seemed accidental, her asking me to help pick the flowers or to taste a dessert she wasn't sure about. But after a while, I realized she was seeking me out intentionally. She would brush past me in the kitchen, her fingers barely grazing mine when we reached for the same spoon. Her voice would drop softer when she spoke to me, her eyes searching mine longer than they should dot. It wasn't loud or obvious. It was the quiet kind of closeness that lives in unspoken spaces. One afternoon, I found her sitting alone in the garden, her phone beside her untouched. The sun filtered through the trees, painting her in fragments of light. I hesitated at the door, but she saw me and smiled, patting the empty chair next to her. "You're hiding from the crowd too?" she asked. I nodded, sitting beside her. "Always. It's easier to breathe out here." She laughed softly. "You sound like someone who's seen too much of life already." "Maybe I've just seen too much of myself," I said, half joking. Half dashed true. Her expression changed, curious, almost tender. "You're not like anyone I've met," she said quietly. "You don't talk much, but it feels like your silence has meaning." I turned to her, unsure what to say. Her words were simple, but they carried weight. Nobody had ever spoken to me like that before. Not even the people who claimed to love me. Before I could respond, Daniel's voice called from inside the house. Lucy's eyes darted toward the door, then back to me. She looked suddenly tired, her smile fading. "He means well," she murmured, almost to herself. "He always does." But sometimes I feel like everyone around me already decided what my life should look like. The words slipped out of her like a confession she hadn't planned to make. I watched her quietly, not knowing if I should answer. "Lucy?" I said softly. She shook her head quickly, forcing a small smile. "Forget I said that. I just sometimes it feels like I'm playing a role that doesn't fit." Then she stood up and walked back toward the house, leaving me with a heart that didn't know whether to ache for her or fear her. After that day, I tried to stay away. I told myself that the more I saw her, the harder it would be to remember where the lines were drawn. But it was like trying to stay away from sunlight. It always found me. Whether I wanted it or not. During dinner, I'd look down just to find her eyes already on me. During morning tea, she'd hand me a cup first, our fingers brushing briefly long enough to burn. And sometimes, late at night, I'd hear her footsteps passing my door, pausing for a second, as if deciding whether to knock. Each moment felt like a secret we weren't brave enough to admit existed. One evening, the sky opened up. Rain began to fall heavily, wrapping the house in silver noise. Everyone had gone to bed early after a long day of planning, and I sat by my window sketching, the light dim. My thoughts scattered. Then came the soft knock. I froze, heart racing. When I opened the door, Lucy stood there, her hair damp, a thin sweater clinging to her shoulders. She held a small book in her hands, the one I had lent her days ago. "I thought I should return this before I forget," she said, smiling faintly. Her voice was hushed, almost uncertain. "You could have waited till morning," I said, trying to sound casual. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted, stepping inside before I could stop her. She glanced at my sketches spread across the table. "You paint people like you see through them." "Sometimes I wish I didn't," I said. "It makes everything harder." She moved closer, tracing a finger across one unfinished portrait. "Is this me?" I hesitated. It was her face drawn from memory, the curve of her jaw, the sadness in her eyes. I couldn't lie. "Yes," I whispered. For a moment she didn't speak. The rain outside grew heavier, filling the silence between us. Then she sat down, placing the book beside her. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. I nodded. She took a deep breath. "I'm not happy, Siren. I should be. I have everything people want. A kind man, a beautiful future, a family who approves. But when I look at him, I don't feel what I'm supposed to feel." Her voice trembled on the last words. I felt my chest tighten. "Then why go through with it?" Tears welled in her eyes, though she tried to smile. "Because he doesn't deserve heartbreak, and I don't know who I am without other people's expectations." She looked away, and for the first time, I saw the loneliness beneath her grace. I wanted to reach for her hand, to tell her she didn't have to pretend, but my body refused to move. Instead, I whispered, "Lucy, you can't keep doing this to yourself." She looked back at me, eyes shining in the dim light. "And you can't keep looking at me the way you do," she said, her voice barely audible. The words struck through me like lightning. We stood frozen, the air heavy with everything unspoken. Then she took a step closer. The distance between us vanished. I could feel her breath, the warmth of her skin. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. For one suspended second, her hand lifted, hovering near my face, trembling, and I thought she would touch me, but she didn't. She dropped her hand, turned away, and walked to the door. "I should go," she said softly. "Lucy," I whispered, but the word broke apart before I could find another. She looked back once, her eyes full of something I didn't have a name for. Then she was gone, the door clicking softly behind her. The rain outside swallowed the world in sound. I stood there, unable to move, feeling the ghost of her presence in the air. It wasn't love yet, but it was the beginning of something that would destroy us both. The days that followed were heavier than before. Every breath I took in that house felt like an act of restraint, every step a quiet rebellion against what my heart wanted. I started waking up earlier, slipping out to the garden with my paints long before anyone else was awake. The garden became my hiding place, my confession booth, my punishment, my escape. I painted endlessly, though nothing ever felt right. The faces I drew all carried the same eyes, the same soft, knowing sadness that haunted me every night. Lucy's eyes. I told myself that if I stayed away, the feeling would fade. But desire isn't a flame that dies out when you starve it. It burns deeper, slower, until it becomes part of you. At breakfast, I began sitting at the far end of the table. During family gatherings, I busied myself with small chores, pretending to be occupied whenever she entered the room. Yet somehow, even in silence, her presence found me. I could feel her gaze brush against me like wind through curtains, unseen but undeniable. One afternoon, while I was sketching in the garden, I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. "I've been looking for you," Lucy said softly. Her voice made my hand tremble, leaving a faint stroke of charcoal across the page. "You shouldn't be here," I murmured. "Someone might see." She smiled sadly. "Everyone's too busy planning the perfect wedding. No one notices me anymore." I put down the pencil, afraid to meet her eyes. "Maybe that's a good thing." "It doesn't feel good," she whispered. "It feels like disappearing." I finally turned to face her. The wind played with the ends of her hair. She looked both fragile and fierce at once. "Lucy," I said carefully, "you have to stop coming to me like this." She stepped closer. "And if I can't, then I'll stay away," I said, though my voice wavered. She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You say that, but I see you looking for me too." I didn't deny it. The truth sat between us like a living thing, breathing, pulsing, dangerous. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The sound of the wind filled the space between us. Then she said quietly, "I can't stop thinking about you, Siren. I've tried." I wake up beside him and still, "It's you." Her words cut through me like a confession I've been waiting for and dreading all at once. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that what we were feeling was nothing but confusion, but my heart wouldn't let me lie. "Please," I said, my voice trembling, "you have to forget whatever this is. You're engaged. You love him." She shook her head slowly. "I care for him, yes. But love?" Her voice broke. "I don't even know what love feels like anymore. Maybe I never did until you." I looked away, afraid she'd see the tears burning in my eyes. "Don't say that," I whispered. "Don't make this harder than it already is." Her silence was louder than any argument. That evening, during dinner, I tried to act normal. The house was filled with laughter again, the sound of cutlery and chatter echoing through the walls. Daniel sat beside Lucy, his hand resting casually on hers. She smiled at him, but her eyes found mine across the table. In that one look, I felt both loved and condemned. It was the cruelest kind of affection, one that could never be named out loud. I excused myself halfway through the meal, saying I wasn't feeling well. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I went to the old family library, the quietest place in the house, hoping to lose myself among the books and shadows. The rain began again outside, tapping softly against the windows. I lit a small lamp, its golden light spilling across the shelves. I thought I was alone until I heard the door creak open behind me. "Siren?" Lucy's voice whispered. I turned, startled. She stood there, her dress pale against the dark wood, her eyes glistening in the dim light. "Lucy, no," I said quietly. "You shouldn't be here." "I couldn't stay in there," she said, closing the door behind her. "Not while you were hurting." Her words broke something inside me. "I'm not the only one hurting," I said, trying to sound calm. "You're destroying yourself too." She shook her head, tears welling up. No, I'm already destroyed. I've been pretending for so long that I don't even remember what real feels like. But when I'm with you, her voice cracked. She stepped closer, her hands trembling. When I'm with you, I feel alive. Do you understand that? I couldn't move. My heart was racing, my body fighting every instinct at once. Lucy, I whispered, this isn't right. Then why does it feel truer than anything else in my life? Her tears fell then quietly, one after another. She looked at me as if asking for permission to break. I reached for her without thinking, my fingers brushing hers. Her hand was cold, trembling, fragile in my palm. The moment our hands met, everything else disappeared, the storm outside, the world beyond that room. Even the guilt that had been eating at me thought we stood there in silence, holding on to something that shouldn't exist, something that could never last. She closed her eyes, a sob escaping her lips, and I felt my own tears fall to the floor. For a long time, we said nothing, just breathing, just feeling the weight of what we had done, even if it was only this holding hands in secret, in a house full of people who could never understand. When she finally let go, it felt like a piece of me was being torn away. I can't keep doing this, she whispered. But I don't know how to stop. Neither did I. She turned to leave, her shoulders shaking, and I didn't stop her. I just stood there, my heart breaking in quiet rebellion. When the door closed behind her, I sank to the floor beside the old bookshelf, my palms still tingling from where she had touched me. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky like a warning I'd ignored too long. I should have let her go that night, but my heart refused to listen. The day of the engagement party arrived with sunlight that felt wrong, too bright for the weight pressing against my chest. The house was alive with guests, chatter, and the faint clinking of glass. Laughter poured from every corner, music played softly, and Daniel looked like the happiest man alive. Lucy, on the other hand, looked like a ghost of herself. Her dress was a soft champagne color, delicate and perfect, but her face was pale. She smiled when people spoke to her, laughed at the right times, and yet her eyes were somewhere else. I kept to the edges of the room, standing near the tall windows where I could pretend to be invisible. I told myself that all I had to do was survive this night, smile politely, offer congratulations, and leave before my heart made a fool of me. But fate has a cruel sense of timing. When Lucy entered the room, the crowd shifted, voices rising in admiration. She looked radiant, but I could see the tremor in her hands as she accepted compliments. Our eyes met across the sea of faces. For a fleeting second, everything else disappeared. The voices, the light, even the air. Her gaze locked onto mine like a confession, unspoken yet screaming. I turned away quickly, my pulse racing. I shouldn't have come. Daniel raised his glass, tapping it lightly with a spoon. Everyone, he began, his voice warm, proud, unaware. Thank you for being here tonight to celebrate the beginning of my future with the woman I love. The room erupted in cheers. Lucy smiled faintly, but I saw the way her fingers tightened around her glass. She's the most genuine, beautiful person I've ever met, Daniel continued, his voice glowing with pride. And soon she'd be my wife, my partner, my everything. The applause that followed was thunderous. People clapped, some even whistled. But Lucy didn't move. She stood there, frozen, her face pale under the golden light. Then slowly she looked at me again. In that moment, I saw something break inside her. Her chest rose sharply, her lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came. She glanced at Daniel, then back at me, and for a second I thought she might faint. Instead, she set down her glass with trembling hands and began walking straight toward me. My breath caught. Lucy, I whispered under my breath as she approached, but she didn't stop. The crowd turned, the laughter fading as they noticed her sudden movement. Daniel frowned, confused. Lucy? He called softly. She didn't answer. She stopped just a foot away from me, her eyes glistening, her hands shaking. I could feel the world closing in, the air thick with tension. "I can't lie anymore," she whispered, barely audible, but in the silence that had fallen. Everyone heard her. "Lucy, don't," I breathed, panic rising in my throat. She looked at me with a sorrow that cut through the noise of my heart. "I'm sorry," she said, and then she stepped forward. Her lips met mine. The room went still. It wasn't a kiss of passion or rebellion. It was raw, broken, trembling. A desperate truth finally escaping after being buried too long. Her hands cupped my face like she was saying goodbye before even beginning. For a heartbeat, I forgot where we were, who was watching, what would come next. There was only her scent, her tears, her pain. Then the sound of glass shattering broke the moment. Daniel's wine glass slipped from his hand, crashing to the floor. The crimson liquid spread like blood across the white tablecloth. The gasps followed, sharp and collective. Someone dropped a fork. A woman screamed softly. Lucy pulled away, tears spilling freely now, her lips trembling. The silence that followed was unbearable. Daniel's voice cracked as he spoke. "Lucy, what are you doing?" I couldn't look at him. I couldn't move. My entire body felt paralyzed. Lucy turned to him, her voice shaking. "I can't pretend anymore, Daniel. I can't keep lying to you or to myself." He took a step back, his face pale, disbelief painted across it. "Lying? About what?" Her eyes darted toward me. That single glance was enough to tell him everything. The room erupted. Voices rose like thunder. Someone shouted her name, another called mine. Daniel's mother grabbed Lucy's arm, demanding an explanation, while my aunt gasped like she'd seen a ghost. Daniel looked at me as if he didn't recognize who I was. "You?" he whispered, his voice breaking. "My own cousin?" Tears blurred my vision. "Daniel, I never meant, don't," he snapped, his voice trembling with rage and betrayal. Lucy reached for him, but he stepped back as if her touch burned him. "You ruined everything," he said, his voice hollow. "Both of you." It wasn't passion, my voice whispered in my mind, trembling with grief. It was pain finding its way out. Lucy's tears streamed down her face. "I'm sorry," she said again, though the words sounded meaningless in the chaos that followed. Daniel's father shouted. His mother cried. Guests whispered behind their hands. Every pair of eyes in that room felt like a knife against my skin. Lucy turned to me one last time, her lips trembling, her voice breaking on a whisper only I could hear. "I didn't mean to hurt you." Before I could speak, she ran out of the hall, through the front door, into the cold night air. The room was left in ruins. Daniel stood motionless, his hands still trembling, his face pale with disbelief. My family stared at me like I was a stranger, a stain on their celebration. No one moved to stop me as I walked out. The only sound that followed was the soft crunch of glass beneath my shoes and the faint, broken echo of her name on Daniel's lips. Outside, the air was sharp, cold. The night sky stretched endlessly above, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. The lights from the house flickered behind me, a world I no longer belonged to. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear Lucy crying, an echo lost in the wind. I wanted to run to her, to tell her we could fix this somehow, but deep down, I knew the truth. There was no undoing what had just happened. That kiss had changed everything. It wasn't a confession. It was destruction wrapped in tenderness. And as I stood beneath the dark sky, shivering in the cold silence that followed the chaos, one thought kept repeating in my head, slow, heavy, final. In that one moment, everything I ever loved turned into dust. The morning after the chaos felt like the end of the world, quiet but heavy with what had already burned. The house that once buzzed with wedding talk and laughter now stood in uneasy silence. I could feel their stares before I even stepped out of my room. The disappointment, the disgust, the betrayal carved into every glance. No one said good morning. No one said anything at all. At breakfast, the chair beside mine was empty. Lucy's. Daniel didn't come down either. My aunt sat stiffly at the head of the table, her jaw clenched, her voice sharp when she finally spoke. "You've brought shame to this family," she said coldly, not looking up from her plate. "To him, to all of us." I tried to speak, to explain, but no words came. Every syllable dissolved under the weight of guilt pressing against my chest. She finally looked up, her eyes hard as stone. "Pack your things, Siren. You're not welcome here anymore." And that was it. My trial, my sentence, my exile, all spoken in one breath. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. Maybe I knew I deserved it. Maybe part of me believed it too. By noon, I was standing outside with a small suitcase and a heart that felt like broken glass. The whispers from inside followed me like ghosts, disgusting, shameful, unnatural. Lucy was nowhere to be found. Daniel's car was gone. Her room was locked. No one knew where she was, or perhaps they did, and simply didn't want to tell me. It wasn't until that evening, as I stood in the empty garden one last time, that her mother came out. She didn't speak. She simply extended an envelope toward me, her hands trembling slightly, eyes wet but distant. "She left this. For you," she whispered. The letter was folded neatly, her handwriting soft and familiar. My fingers shook as I opened it. "Siren, I know I've ruined everything. Maybe you'll hate me for it, maybe you should. But I need you to know this. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I just couldn't breathe inside the life they built for me. Every day, I woke up and tried to be who they wanted. Daniel's fiancée, the perfect daughter, the polite smile at the table. But then you came along, and everything I buried inside me started to live again. When I kissed you, I wasn't trying to destroy anything. I was trying to feel real just once. Now everything is gone. I don't know where I'm going, but I can't stay. Maybe one day, when all of this stops hurting, you'll remember me not as the girl who broke your life apart, but as the one who loved you enough to stop pretending. Please don't come looking for me." Lucy, her handwriting blurred as the tears spilled from my eyes, dripping onto the ink. I read it again and again until the words stopped making sense. The world around me was silent except for the faint rustle of rain starting to fall, the same kind of soft, hesitant drizzle that once brought us together. I folded the letter and held it against my chest. My fingers were numb. My body felt hollow. That night, I packed what little I had left. My brushes, my canvases, the sweater she once borrowed and never returned. I walked through the empty hallways of the house, every step echoing with memories, her laughter in the kitchen, her voice calling my name from across the garden, the warmth of her hand brushing against mine in passing, all gone the next morning. I stood at the train station, soaked in rain that wouldn't stop falling. My suitcase sat by my feet, but I could barely feel its weight. The sky was a dull gray, the tracks stretching endlessly ahead, a path leading nowhere I wanted to go. I stared at the ticket in my hand, the ink bleeding slightly from the raindrops. The name of the city meant nothing. It wasn't where she was. As the train pulled in, the world around me blurred, steam, rain, and the muffled sounds of strangers. I stepped aboard and sat by the window, my reflection faint against the glass. Outside, the town disappeared slowly behind the fog. The streets we used to walk, the garden where she'd stand barefoot in the grass, the porch where our eyes met for the first time. Each passing image tore. Another piece from me. The rhythm of the train matched the ache inside my chest. The world was moving forward, but I was stuck in the moment she whispered. "I can't lie anymore. I closed my eyes, and she was there again, the warmth of her breath, the trembling in her voice, the way she looked at me like she was both terrified and free. I could still smell her perfume, still hear her laugh, still feel her touch lingering where it shouldn't. Every memory hurt now. Love shouldn't destroy. But ours did. We tried to build something honest in a world that punished truth. And maybe that was our greatest mistake, believing love alone could survive the weight of everyone else's expectations. Outside the window, rain streaked down the glass like tears. My own reflection looked like a stranger's, empty, exhausted, lost. I pressed the letter against the glass, watching it blur behind the raindrops. Her words echoed in my head. Please don't come looking for me. But part of me already knew, even if I never saw her again, a part of her would always stay with me. The train began to move faster, the tracks singing beneath the wheels. I watched the horizon swallow the last traces of the life I once knew. I had no destination, no plan, no home, only the ghost of her love and the ache it left behind Dot as the rain poured harder. I whispered into the empty air, not caring who heard me. Goodbye, Lucy. The train roared forward, carrying me into a future I didn't want, through a storm I couldn't escape. And as the town disappeared behind me, as her voice faded with it, I finally understood the cruel truth of it all. I lost her. And with her, I lost the only version of myself that ever felt real. It's been 7 years since that day, the day her lips touched mine and the world stopped breathing. Time has softened the edges of memory, but it never erased the sound of that silence that followed her kiss. Some silences never do fade. They settle inside you, quietly shaping who you become. Now I live in a different city, far from the whispers, far from the weight of my old name. The people here know me only as Siren Hale, the painter who paints heartbreaks. I smile when they say that because in some strange way they're right. Every canvas I touch bleeds a story that started with Lucy. My studio is small, bathed in the soft amber of the late afternoon sun. The air smells faintly of oil paints and turpentine. On the largest easel stands a painting that has followed me through years of rain and recovery, the kiss in the storm. It shows 2 women, one trembling, one brave, caught in the downpour, their lips almost touching, their world dissolving behind them. No one who sees it ever guesses it's me, but every brushstroke holds her name. Sometimes when I'm alone, I talk to the painting. I tell it things I never told her, about the nights I couldn't breathe, about how her letter still rests in a wooden box under my bed, the edges frayed, the ink faded. There were days I thought I'd never heal, but pain has a way of teaching you patience. Slowly, quietly, I learned to live again. A few months ago, I went back, not because I wanted closure, but because I wanted to see if the past had really let me go. The town hadn't changed much. The same rust-colored rooftops, the same narrow lanes lined with jasmine bushes. I walked through the streets like a ghost, unnoticed and untethered. Daniel was there, older, softer. He stood outside the same house that once held all our stories. He was holding a child in his arms, laughing, his wife beside him. She wasn't Lucy. When he saw me, his smile faltered for a second, a flicker of recognition, a shadow of something unsaid, but then he nodded politely. I nodded back. No words. Just a quiet acknowledgement that time had rewritten us both. I didn't ask about her. I didn't have to. That night, at the inn where I stayed, I overheard 2 women talking. Lucy had moved abroad years ago, married a man, they said. Has 2 children now. She's happy, one of them added, though her tone wavered, uncertain, as if happiness could be confirmed from photographs alone. Happy. The word echoed inside me, fragile and bittersweet. I wanted it to be true. I wanted her to have peace, even if I wasn't part of it. The next morning, before leaving town, I walked to the old garden, the place where she first told me she felt trapped, where her hand brushed mine in trembling honesty. The bench was still there, chipped and weathered. I sat there quietly, listening to the wind, half expecting her laughter to rise from somewhere behind me. But only the rustle of leaves answered. I took a small folded paper from my pocket, a sketch of her I'd drawn years ago, the way she looked at me before she kissed me, her eyes full of both courage and fear. I buried it beneath the jasmine bush, pressing the soil gently, like tucking a secret back into the earth where it belonged. Then I whispered, "You're free now, Lucy, and so am I." As I walked away, I realized it wasn't pain anymore. It was something softer, a kind of acceptance that felt almost holy. Now, back in my studio, I stand before The Kiss in the Storm again. It's the only painting I'll never sell. Some things aren't meant to be owned by others, only remembered. When I paint now, it's not to hold on to her, but to understand what she meant. Lucy wasn't my forever, she was my awakening. The person who reminded me that love, even when it's forbidden, can still be real. Sometimes love doesn't come to stay. It comes to teach, to burn you open, to make you feel alive just once, and then to leave you changed forever. She kissed me once in front of the world, and that single moment defined my lifetime. The world remembers scandal. I remember truth. At night, when the city sleeps, I walk by the sea. The air is salt and wind, the horizon melting into the last orange breath of the sunset. The waves whisper my past, pulling at my thoughts like threads of an old story I can't quite let go. I stand barefoot at the edge of the water, the sand cool beneath my feet. The sound of the waves fills the silence that used to hurt, and for the first time, it feels like music. I look up, the sky vast and gentle, the kind of blue that feels endless. I close my eyes and imagine her somewhere, maybe watching a sunset of her own, holding someone else's hand. And I smile, because love like ours doesn't die. It just changes shape, from pain to art, from memory to peace. Some loves are not meant to be kept. They're meant to be remembered, like a scar you learn to live with. The sea wind brushes against my hair as I turn away, the soft sound of piano keys in my mind, fading with the light. And as the sun dips below the horizon, I whisper her name one last time, not in longing, but in gratitude. Then I walk on, alone, but whole.